Welcome to your next English lesson, Year 3. Today we're going to be writing a conversation. And in particular, we're going to be writing a conversation between William and Sprog. Some of the things to remember when we're writing our conversation. When they're speaking, remember to use speech marks, something we spent quite a lot of time on this year and some extra work on this week as well. And if you can, try to use words other than just said all the time. Said. It can become a little bit repetitive. Words like asked, cried, shouted, called, replied. Some different words other than just said. Remember, very importantly, when you're writing a conversation between two people, when somebody new starts speaking, you have to start a new line each time. Something we discussed last lesson as well. And I've also written use some narrative, and I've circled that in blue because it's really important. You need to tell the story a little bit as well. If you're writing a conversation between two people and it's just speech all the way through, what shall we do, said William. I'm not sure, said Sprog. Shall we go here, said William. Good idea, said Sprog. This is fun, said William. It can become a little bit boring and you don't really give the reader any idea as to what's really happening in the story. So whilst you're writing your conversation, you need to sometimes have maybe one sentence telling the story, saying what they're doing, what the characters are doing whilst they're speaking. I've given you an example on my board here. I'm just going to read my conversation between William and Sprog. Do you like the treehouse? Asked Sprog. I love it, said William. William was throwing old potatoes down from the watchtower. Shall we play knights? Said Sprog. Definitely, cried William happily. So I've tried to use words other than said. I've got asked here and cried. I've also remembered to start a new line every time a new character starts speaking. Something else we need to try to remember. And very importantly, and I've underlined this in blue, in the middle of my conversation, I've tried to tell the story a little bit. William was throwing old potatoes down from the watchtower. So whilst William and Sprog are talking to each other, I've also written what William was doing. So I'm telling the story using some narrative a little bit as well, which makes it a bit more interesting. And now it gives the reader a little bit more of an idea what's actually happening whilst these two characters are talking to each other. So today, what I'd like you to do is write your own conversation, but there are actually two sheets. So some of you might just want to write a reply to each of these sentences. So the first one says, do you like the treehouse? Asked Sprog quietly. So you could just write what William might say back. He might answer that question. So you haven't got to write a whole conversation. You can just write an answer to each of these questions, remembering to use speech marks correctly and start with your capital letters. But hopefully lots of you might be able to go to the other sheet and attempt to write your own conversation. I've started one here for you. William and Sprog were in the garden looking at the treehouse. Do you like the treehouse? Asked Sprog quietly. So quite similar to how I've started mine. So you might be able to use some of these ideas. Then you can use this space to continue the conversation. See if you can get William and Sprog to maybe speak 3 times each. And if you can, add little bits of narrative into your conversation as well. Tell the story a little bit as well. So good practice using speech marks, writing a conversation, remembering to have a new speaker on a new line each time, and using our speech marks in the correct places. I will be available on Google Meet if you'd like to ask any questions, or maybe you'd like to read your conversation to me, because it'll be lovely to hear. Do keep checking your work, because that might tell you if you might have made a mistake or if something doesn't quite make sense. If you do finish that and you want to answer the final question at the bottom, on both sheets it does say, how do you think the story will end? So can you write a short prediction of how you think this story might end? What might happen at the end? How might it finish? Thank you for watching the video today, Year 3. I look forward to seeing your conversations.